Don't engage alone. We do this together.
Yeah!
Yeah!
We got it! We got it!
New 52 book.
Somebody clip this one.
Welcome to Comics League Dark. I'm Jared. I'm here with the old man Neck from the Phoenix Press. What's up, brother?
Yo.
And we are here once again with Sam Liu. What's up, man?
How's it going, guys?
Good. So we're just going to do a general Q&A and just hang out, as opposed to like when we normally have Sam on and talk about like one project. We're really just opening this up to anyone. What type of questions have you had for his whole career? Now, Sam, I'll start us off. Which like group did you have more fun working for, Marvel or DC?
That's tough because when I worked at Marvel, it was sort of a splinter sort of group.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of isolated on its own. I think Marvel had, I think I've said this before, but Marvel had made a deal with Lionsgate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Director videos. And so I don't know, they didn't have like it was sort of just sort of like this remote sort of thing, right? We weren't on this. Well, this is before Disney actually bought. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, we had our own little sort of building that they rented out. It was sort of in two parts. Like the first one was in Century City, and then the second time it was in like North Hollywood. So I don't know. I mean, I think the WB one was definitely more structured.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and sort of a lot of the people at Marvel, you know what I mean? Like the people at WB, I feel like, they're people that I've worked with a lot before, right? A lot of the people that I had worked for in the past, worked creatively, in the art department, but they're more freelance, mm-hmm. right? So it's not like I saw them every day. Whereas like when I was at Warner Brothers, like right after when the Marvel thing finished, and I went to sort of start working on things like, Public Enemies and things like that, right? When the GTV thing started really going for WB, we had our own sort of like part of a building and stuff like that. And mm-hmm. so those were like all my friends that I knew back at Sony, or sort of along the way. And so that was a lot of fun just because, again, it was just like, we were all in the same building, you walk out to the office and then there's multiple people to talk to. Mm-hmm. The Marvel one, again, like, there was only a really small crew that was sort of internal in the building, right? So most of my board crew was freelance for the most part,
Mm-hmm. I see.
I don't know. I guess Warner Brothers, you know what I mean? As far as like environment and all that kind of stuff,
Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious based upon the volume of DC work you did compared to Marvel. So
yeah,
there is that.
I mean, just like looking at the general output, I feel like Warner Brothers was more the well-oiled machine, because they were putting out stuff like 2 or 3 movies a year in like the late 2000s, 2010s. I remember this. Mm-hmm. It's so weird. I anticipate movies, and now I'm like talking to the guy who made them. It's weird.
it's really strange. It's really strange. Trust me. For me, yeah. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead and finish up your thought.
Well, but like Marvel kind of like just put out stuff here or there. It was kind of slapdash, whereas like Warner Brothers, like a well-oiled machine.
Well, because also the interesting thing about DC is that DC has more of a legacy in terms of animation than Marvel, I think, based upon like when you think of like animated like superhero content, you mostly think of DC.
Yeah.
Also, DC's just better in general.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Well, Warner Brothers definitely committed to it,
mm-hmm.
Whereas I kind of feel like, a lot of animation is sort of like this sort of like side afterthought thing, right? unless you're working in feature, right? And so I was lucky that DC again was committed to basically like it was basically a sort of, I mean, now it's different, right? Because again, it's a whole different thing now, just because of the whole, business, changeover. Whereas like there's not much DC stuff that's going to come out. I'm not at DC anymore, but like the whole division is sort of gutted, and so it's a lot of sort of like asking to see if we can work on their projects. You know what I mean? From what I hear, right? And then basically like not getting a green light because again we're not really considered profitable. You know what I mean? Or like we're not really like big money maker. We're kind of this thing that's sort of like we could or we couldn't. You know what I mean? That's why again like we had a little bit of a dispute right online.
First off, I just want to say I apologize again. That was my bad.
No, because I get it, right? Because again, before I got into the business, right, I'm just like everybody else, right? And even now, we're all just, even the people that work on it, right? We're just fans of stuff. You know what I mean? And so we have our opinions, right? There's things that we love and the things that we hate and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's just that it's difficult, especially in this small market kind of thing, because again, it's like, I think like you could like endure it more in the past, right? Because like Teen Titans when it first came out, like the Glenmore comic one, right? In like in 2000, whatever it was, 3 or whatever it was, right? 2.
Yeah.
Like that got a lot of hate when it first came out, right? Like all the stuff we put out, every time there's a change, you know what I mean? Fans are like brutal, right? Like when it came out, people
God, that is an understatement.
Yeah, like they hated it, right? But now there's like some people is just like, oh, we love it. Like, oh, why did it get canceled? And why Teen Titans the same thing, right? Like, a lot of people will kind of consider that old, 2003 Teen Titans as the pinnacle of like Teen Titans, right?
Yeah, and just wait like 10 years. The people who grew up with Teen Titans Go, they're going to be like, Teen Titans Go is the best thing ever.
Yeah. And so everybody hates it always in the beginning, right? But it's difficult because again, like it doesn't get. The difficult thing for me anyways, right, is like I feel like the money people listen to that, right? And so things get canceled prematurely, right?
Okay.
Because so those things don't help, especially you're not even giving it a chance.
Yeah, I know. That's my bad. And to like
it's not just you, right? Because again, this is my love-hate relationship with fandom. Right?
Yeah.
So but again, everybody is into it. I remember being at this, I think for Red Sun, right? There was a voice actor that kind of came in and stuff like that. And I think like one of the Star Wars movies came out and stuff like that. And I just remember like, walking with him as we're going to the parking lot, stuff like that. And him and this other voice actors, they were talking about Star Wars and how bad it is, right? And they were just bashing on it, And I'm just like, and I was just kind of thinking like, dude, like, you're in the industry and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? It's just like I don't know why you're hating on so much on something. Do you know what I mean? Because I understand, like, as just people in an isolated sort of situation, right? There's things that you love, there's things that you hate, right? I mean, there's movies, again, like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't get on because I don't want to get, like, onto this subject because I don't want to get, like, bashed on. But there's
you don't want to get, like, clipped and then you go walk into an office like, Sam, did you say this on
Right. That's the danger.
Yeah, it's all good. In my defense, I could have phrased the tweet better instead of saying boring. I'll own that. So it's all good. It's all good.
I just ask that people be a little bit more sort of tempered, right?
Sure.
Because people writing reviews on things that haven't even come out, on Amazon and stuff like that. I'm just like, I don't understand why you would even do that. Do you know what I mean? It's like do you not want product to come out? You know what I mean? Because especially now, the state of entertainment and stuff like that, so few things are getting greenlit. You know
and Jay Heat is slowly joining us. How you doing, Jay Heat?
Hey, Vaughn, how's everybody doing? Good to see you again.
I got a little warmer in here.
So yeah, that's the thing is because you don't have to tell me that fandom can be a little intense because as you know, I hate Lois. So I'm kind of a pariah in the Superman community. Like legit, Sam, if you deviate in any way in fan opinions from like anything in the Superman fandom, they come at you like a pack of rabid dogs, bro.
Yeah. And then sometimes you change their mind. And you know what I mean? Because the thing that bugs me the most, right, is like you can like just shoot your like vile and venom all over the place. And then like a year later you can go like, oh no, my bad. I feel I'm sorry, I changed my mind. whatever, but you've done so much damage already.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just you figuring it out. I understand everybody, takes time or whatever, and they have the initial reaction to things or whatever. But there's a certain amount of damage that happens through it. Do you know what I mean?
May I interject, please? Sorry, I'm trying to be polite about this. I'm trying to be, cordial.
No. But I get it though, right? Because again, it's like that passion is what sort of is also great for it. Do you know what I mean? It's people that are that invested that they're going to get angry and they want to murder people or whatever, But
luckily, what I'm thankful for is that you at least know me, Sam, and you know I'm not doing it to be an a-hole. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, okay, Sam knows it. He knows what I'm doing. I'll reach out anyway to apologize. We're good.
And I have learned as well. You know what I mean? Like when I first, had to sort of start doing press and things like that too, and stuff like that, right? I remember one of the first interviewers, the guy was just like, it's like, you know what, like Warner Brothers should hire me to sort of coach you guys. I was just like, oh.
I mean, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
They should, for a lot of creators, I feel like they do need PR coaching.
Yeah.
So let's go in with some questions real quick.
Wait.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Before we go on, I kind of wanted to offer kind of like a different perspective on things. Yeah, so regarding your stuff with fandom, Sam, I do appreciate your perspective, especially more on like the producer side of it. I totally understand where you're coming from, and I'm speaking when I'm about to say I'm speaking purely on the fan side of things. My opinion then is kind of a two-sided coin because you have like so many people on like the marketing side of things, like stirring up trouble, or like people like, oh, if you don't like this, you're a bad person or whatever. I'm not gonna like say any like kind of names or whatever, but like there's a big kind of polarization aspect to it. I feel like we can't really engage in a lot of this stuff fairly anymore, and I think that the blame lies. I mean, yes, the fans do like all this. Like, first off, all the stuff you said is valid. I'm not trying to
100%.
I'm just also saying like it's a two-sided issue in my opinion, and
right.
If we could all just engage in stuff more like adults, things might be a little bit
social
better.
Media, brother.
You got the fans basically taking one thing like, I'm just gonna make crap up and we're gonna post an article about it. It's news now. Sources say, a rumor says, and I don't know. It's
no, I get it, right? Because it's a weird line, right? Because again, there are things that are not good, right? Those deserve to be criticized, right? And I feel like, anyways, you know what I mean? It's not like I'm trying to be like, oh no, everybody should just, at all times be calm. Do you know what I mean? Because again, there's things that should be called out, right? But to call out something that things weren't given a chance to sort of like, to actually form a real opinion about, and it's based off of like speculation and things like that. I just kind of feel like that's unfair.
Yeah.
And so
totally.
Because there are shows right now that I watch, that are in animation that I'm not really a fan of. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of hype or a lot of hate for it, whatever, right? It's just not for me, right? And so, like everybody else, I have opinions, right? I mean, I've had stories too, even with people like voice actors, you know what I mean? That sort of hated a project that I worked on is just, just saying all this like vile stuff. And I'm just like, do you not want to work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. It's like, what?
It's kind of like my policy is if I don't like anything, I just don't talk about it. I don't engage.
Yeah, that's it. Just don't talk about
it. Because here's the thing. If you don't like something and you don't want it to return, the worst thing you can do is talk about it. Because just talking about something online, even if it's negatively, is helping it. And it's got to the point where a lot of these shows are queuing into it. I'm not naming any names. We all know the suspects. But they purposely do something to induce rage bait on like Twitter or whatever to get the engagement. And it's like what they said in Simpsons. Just don't look. Just don't look.
Yeah, exactly.
It's my opinion. It's just not for me.
Yeah,
right? Exactly.
Right. I'm totally fine with that. Do you know what I mean? Because even when you work on things, right, there are projects, whatever, that I'm just kind of like, wow, okay, this is a script that I don't know. I don't think it's that great, whatever, but that's my job. I gotta like.
It's a paycheck.
I mean, Sam, remember the first show I had you on, I told you how much I was not a big fan of like half of the Killing Joke movie.
Right.
I'm reminded
30
of,
minutes, Jared.
30 minutes that actually, you know what? I'll own this. When you explained to me the purpose of those of the first half of the Killing Joke, it made a little more sense to me. So I'll give you that.
I will say this though, I'm kind of reminded of a Michael Caine quote where someone asked him why he did Jaws 4, and he says, "You know, I haven't seen the movie. From what I've heard, it's a dreadful movie. But I have seen the house it bought me, and it is quite lovely."
Yeah, it's like there's still cash coming in, so as far as you know, it's all good.
Yeah.
But I will say this though before we move on, I definitely agree with Sam Liu's policy. It's best just really not to say anything other than just like the most direct, brief statement possible if you are going to talk about it. But even I have to acknowledge that hate watching is, at least as a trend, has relatively gone down in recent years. I mean, look at Disney's D23 Expo alone. I mean, half that panel was sequels.
Yeah. Well, plus here's the thing.
2015 called, they want their panel back.
Well, because people actually found out that hate watching, these companies don't care if you watch it and hate it. They just care that you watched it. So you're not real. If you don't want the stuff to come back, you're kind of doing the opposte.
Yeah.
Unless you're content creators. So
well, exactly. We kind of have to do this stuff. But so for our first question of the night, so Robert asked, I recently had JM DeMatteis on my show, but I forgot to ask him about the Death short, which you also directed. Can you explain what went into that? How much was gaming involved, etc.? I love that short.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. No, that short was very near and dear to my heart, right? There's a sticky political thing that kind of happened during it that I'm not sure how much of it I should probably get into. But
probably just a tiptoe.
Yeah. I mean,
just a little bit.
I asked at least the people to approach Gaiman, Neil, Gaiman to, it's kind of like, okay, we're working on this thing. Like I wanted to kind of get his thoughts on it and stuff like that. But again, from what I heard on my end, or whatever, he had never responded, and so there was a meeting where they were like, okay, he hasn't responded. You're going to have to like go. So what do you want to do? Right. And so when I was younger and trying to get into comics, I had a friend who was a writer, and, I loved Sandman, right? Sandman was the constant that I would always pick up, right? Other things I would pick up, depending on the artist, depending on the writing, whatever, like I'd buy stuff that I liked or whatever. And then if it started getting bad, I would just cancel it. Right. But Sandman was something that I would just always pick up, and no matter who's drawing it, right? And so we sort of did this little short that I was going to just do as sample pages. And so that basic concept was something that I sort of like, when I met with JM or Mark, I was kind of like, this is kind of what I'm thinking. I have sort of the sort of like main event thing that happens, but I don't know how to get there, right? And so he just like took the whole idea and just really formed this really like beautiful narrative around it, right? Just how it sets up, and then we get to the moment, of that I remember, like when I was in college, and then just the way he sort of like played it out, because again, it's such a specific psychological kind of thing, right? There's no fights, right? There's no sort of, everything like is important. I think that, we only had like 13 minutes worth of, budgeted time of animation. And normally, again, it's roughly like about a page a minute, right? Mm-hmm. But we ended up sort of making it into like a 20-page script, right? Mm-hmm. And so even with that, I had to sort of truncate it down so we basically are able to get it animated and all that kind of stuff. But it was I remember even like Jamie Chung, right, who voiced Death. I think when I was talking to Wes Gleason, who's the casting director, also the voice director on it. I don't think that we knew that she actually did voiceover before, right? I think there were these other actresses that they were trying to pitch me, and I don't know. Again, this is kind of woke or whatever, but I wanted to make it like an Asian, because it's again like my writing partner back, in college. Where he was Japanese, right? And so again, his name is Vincent Omada. Omada is the last name of my friend, right, who passed away, right, like 20 years ago. But she was like, she read it and she was just like, oh, I want to do this, right? Because again, the story, right? Jay Lee, right, who's a comic book artist.
Amazing artist.
Yeah, I love Jay Lee's work, right? And so I was just like, I'd love to get Jay Lee on this, to do the painting, right? We contacted him, and so he was just like, he's like, what you're paying me is less than what I would make in a normal job. He's like, but I'll do it. He's like, because I love the story. And so there was again, a few of these kind of cases again, where I think like, people that were associated with the project, they really sort of like wow, was really moved by it, even, voice acting and stuff like that, like Kari Wahlgren, right? I don't know if you know who she is and stuff. She's a very prominent VO actress, right? I just remember like we had to do this session where there's like two people in it, and like, one of the actors was kind of like not really into it, and he was kind of making fun of it because it was so like emotional, but she really stepped up and was just like, I was really moved by this and stuff like that. And so I don't know, again, it was a risky thing, right? And I knew, because again, there was no fighting, the normal. I remember even like, when I was in the meetings in the beginning with it, right? Like, because you have to meet with like the animation heads, the DC representatives, right? And the home video representatives, right? I was just like, wow, this is so, what I want to do with this is so sort of like off brand as far as like what we're known for, which is fights, right? And action, summer blockbuster type things that we're trying to do, this is a very small piece. There's no fighting in it. It's about somebody dealing with their own sort of like, personal demons. And I remember just thinking like, man, like they're not gonna let me do this story, right? So I kind of came in with two sort of ideas, right? The one that was a little more, there was a little bit of action in, right? And then this one, and I was just like, so I pitched both of them, to them. And I remember, I think it was, from the DC side, they're just like, oh, I think we should go with a more action one, right? And again, God bless Bruce Timm. Like Bruce Timm was in the, obviously in the meeting too, because all the people that were sort of either working on different projects, whatever like that, were part of that meeting. And he's just like, you know what, Sam, you should just do what you want to do.
And dare I say that risk paid off, because I remember watching like one of the videos had like a bunch of DC showcases. Like I remember there was like a Sergeant Rock one with Creature Commandos.
If I remember correctly, that was the one for Death in the Family, where the death of Jason Todd, if I remember correctly.
Under the Red Hood.
No. Nick, they redid that later into its own little short where it's Batman explaining to Superman. They called that Death in the Family. It's basically that, and then they also have a bunch of shorts in. One of it is Death.
I think I watched an earlier collection of them because I never watched Death in the Family. But anyway, no. But that's splitting hairs here. Mm-hmm. What I mean is, I remember watching like the Creature Commandos one was good. I'm sure you do it better. But like when I got to the Sandman one, like I knew of Sandman, I knew of Death, and that short, it touched me emotionally when I watched it. This is like 15 years ago, by the way. Mm-hmm. Because according to Jared, I'm an old man. So, but anyway, I just want to say thank you for making such an emotionally resonant short. The passion is on screen. You can tell it's made with love, and every time I watch it, I just feel emotionally affected by it. It's art. You made art, sir, and I thank you for it.
I got to shout out the composer, right? Like Ray Weedman.
Oh yes,
he was like so committed to the thing, and his music is like, I don't know, so beautiful. Like the music is like half of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I just remember working with him and just, talking about, just the sort of the direction or whatever. He just sort of made it so beautiful. There was like 3 pieces of score or whatever that I'm just like, yeah, I'm still emotional when I listen to it. Right.
I remember, so I'm watching the collection of shorts, and I always love those, particularly if I don't know what's in them, because it's like it's a little surprise. So it's like, yeah, we have Sergeant Rock and the Creature Commandos, and all of a sudden this comes on, and I kind of rank myself as someone who knows DC characters, but when it started off, I point at the screen, I'm like, who the hell are you? And why am I crying right now? It's like, wow. But yeah, even as someone that like has never read Sandman, it was yes, Jay Heat, there are some comics that I haven't read before. Hold your shock.
Jared, we are officially revoking your comics lord.
Hey! You're on my channel. I still have that crown. But anyway,
this channel is now called Comic Squire.
All right, so we've lost Nick. So my point is, in terms of like of the short, yeah, it was very enjoyable and it was very like emotional on that, and the way it like I guess it dealt with the topic of death was like very poignant and very like emotional. So I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, again, it's I kind of feel like it's a very fine line that I had to walk, right? And so I'm just so thankful. I mean, like, Leonardo Nam, who is the the voice of Vincent, the main, I think he was on Westworld.
I think so.
Yeah.
Who did he play on Westworld?
I don't know. I know he was an extra.
He was the guy that basically I didn't watch Westworld actually, but
I saw, like, I've seen like the first 2 seasons.
So. I saw clips, but I could recognize his voice.
I felt like he's like the main robotics doctor.
Yep.
Okay, if I saw a picture, I'm sure I'd recognize it.
He was in. I've seen him in a lot of other stuff, so okay, right. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. He had a small part in that Marvel, that Werewolf by Night thing. Also, he was one of the assassins, which I didn't think it was really playing to his strengths. But again, he's, there was a movie that I remember again when we were casting. What's it called? Like, it was a baseball. It was like a Japanese. It was a baseball sounding thing, right? Like, but it was like about the Japanese internment camps, right? And he played a character that was going off to war, right? They enlisted into the World War II, and these are people interned in America, right? He did this, his character had to make like a goodbye speech to basically everybody that was sort of in the camp before he went to war, and I was so moved by it. And I was just like, this guy can like he could do this, He had just a really sort of like I don't know, emotional, but it wasn't. But there was a dignity to it. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I was just really impressed by, again, those clips that I saw, and I was just like, yeah, I think this guy. I think he's the guy.
Atchison asked, you were one of the directors for the 2008 Hulk versus animated film, particularly the Thor segment. Can you describe what it was like directing it?
This is another sort of behind the scenes kind of thing, right? Like originally when I got like Frank Parr, right, who was the producer on it. So he, I'm trying not to get lost in the weeds because there's stuff that connects to other stuff, right? Okay, I'll try to just make it really quick. But,
sure.
So there was for the director videos, there was 8, right? There was an 8 movie deal from Lionsgate and Marvel, right? And so they made the first 4, and then they took a break because they wanted to see how the first 4 was going to go before they decided, okay, are we going to do the next 4 or not, right? I had just come off of basically directing on The Batman, right? That TV series from like 2004, I was so bummed, right? Because that was a production nightmare.
Oh, don't worry. Give it like another 5 years. It's going to be nostalgically popular. You know how these things work.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of people that online now, obviously, because that was like whatever 20 years ago.
Yeah, things.
I mean, I enjoyed it, so there's me.
Right.
I mean, you got to realize we're only just now getting for X-Men Evolution, is starting to get the love it deserves, and that was 2003, I think.
And so, anyways, like, so the first 4 I storyboarded on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least like 2 of them, right? Like the Iron Man one and the Doctor Strange one, right? And so there was the break that happened, and then when it started up again, Frank Parr asked me if I wanted to direct on 2 of the next ones, right? I think I ended up directing 3 of them, but anyways, and so I originally came on to because they were going to do like a split one, of like X-Men versus the Avengers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so I get on, and then we sort of start to work on it, right? Then they say like, oh, you stop. We can't do it because of like licensing.
Oh, the Fox thing?
Because of Wolverine, right?
Ah, I see.
And so, because I think there was like 2 Wolverine things, right? Because there was the Hulk versus Wolverine, right? Which was half of it, right? And then the other one, instead of being the Hulk Thor one, right? Before that, Hulk Thor kind of came about as basically a redirect, right? Because originally it was supposed to be Avenger versus X-Men.
Oh, that would have been so cool.
Yeah, right. And so they were just like, Wolverine's in both of them, so you can't do it.
Okay, I see.
Because again, the only reason that we weren't able to get around it is like you split it up, and so there's only, a half of Wolverine and then the other. But now you have Wolverine in both of them. That makes, that goes against whatever the license or whatever, right? So there's that. And so it was gnarly, right? Because again, it became, I was losing time basically because they were trying to figure out what it is, whatever, and you're still on a schedule, right? The clock's already ticking, right? So when that was happening, I was just thumbnailing stuff. So half of it, it was my storyboards because I was just like, I'm sitting here waiting. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I just need to get an idea. I just need to like dump stuff out, and I'll mix stuff together. You know what I mean? As the script comes in, and so yeah, that was pretty gnarly. The other thing too is just like I had no idea how violent, because again, I'm used to working, especially back in the 90s, right? Like the whole broadcast standards and practice thing.
Yeah,
was very, very tight, right? And so, I'm still kind of working off of that type of idea, right? And then I see, Hulk versus Wolverine.
Yeah,
limbs are kind of going off, and I'm just like, damn, we could.
There's blood. He's being stabbed.
I think that leads into actually a good question. So, someone who has worked in network TV and the direct-to-video market, what's the biggest difference in when it comes to like the constraints you're under? Like we're talking about like standard practices, like can't say "but" on children's television. Like, was there slightly less restrictions? Were there more restrictions? Like, what was the biggest difference in terms of like content?
What you mean for BSMP, and then
like what you could get away with, what you couldn't, kind of thing?
Because the BSMP at the time, right? It's like if you have to wear a seatbelt. If you're in a car, you have to wear a seatbelt.
Okay.
If you're on a motorcycle, you have to have a helmet, right? That's why sometimes you see Batman, he's got to have a helmet on for his like.
Or like in X-Men Evolutions, because I started watching that. So Wolverine puts the whole costume on with the cowl, then he puts the motorcycle helmet on.
Again, that's BSMP.
Literally, his skull has like his brain.
His skull is made of metal. That ain't breaking.
Right. You can't punch like into camera. You can't point a gun into camera. Guns, depending on what it was too, because even like the Batman, right? It's like we're like, oh, cool. Now we can finally actually draw guns, right? Then Columbine happens. And then it's just like, okay, now you got to have these like Nerf-looking guns or whatever, right? Because it can't look like a real gun. And so, anyways, that's BSMP, right?
That's why in Spider-Man the Animated Series they all use laser guns.
Right.
Or in BTAS, they all have like really like sci-fi looking guns that all shoot like laser beams.
Yeah. So it's brutal, right? Especially when you're trying to tell like, you know what I mean, like a dramatic story. So again, like the whole thing of like people getting, like Deadpool getting his, his arm cut into like ham hocks or whatever. And even just like stabbing like those guys, those SWAT guys or whatever. Not SWAT guys, but those like whatever the guards or whatever.
There's a scene where like Wolverine jumps on Hulk and stabs his claws, and
Yeah, right.
you just see blood come across the camera, and I'm like, my God.
Yeah, and just in his back, like he's just like in his. I'm just like, man, I had no idea we were allowed to do that, you know. Or else I
Yeah.
would have just made.
You're like, all right.
Yeah. So
Let's get that blood pumping, pun intended. There you go.
Oh, dear God.
So, Robert, so for Justice League Gods and Monsters, it was clearly meant to be the start of a series of movies, but didn't work out. Stuff was shown of Steel, Mary Marvel, etc. In that world. Were there other things planned out?
yeah, they had plans basically a season, right? It was because so much of the stuff is again done through business, right? They always need a partner, right?
Yeah.
So there was going to be a series, but there were shorts, right? Between like 2 to 5 minutes. And so I was going to direct on that, right? They were all going to connect. So again, at the end of it, they can put it all into like a DVD package. You know what I mean?
Essentially compile them into a movie, essentially.
Right. But there was like business stuff because there was the partner, which I can't even remember, but it was a smaller studio. Again, it was just this thing. It was like, okay, this is the next thing you're going to work on, and then it became okay, we got to wait because this deal hasn't gone through yet. And then it was like, it hasn't gone through yet. Then it became this thing where it's just like, I don't know if it's going to happen, you know? And then it ultimately didn't happen. So,
well, on that, I might as well to talk about that. So the thing about that movie particularly that I actually really dig is the whole idea about how it's like with the Superman of that world, even though he's like the son of Zod and not the son of Jor-El, he's still kind of Superman. Like he's still a nice guy. I use air quotes because these are the Justice League that straight up openly murder people. So it's like, I mean, Batman's a vampire.
Right.
So I always found that like concept very like interesting. How even if you tweak these characters a little bit, they still end up being the same characters.
Yeah.
You can take the man out of the bat, but you can't take the bat out of the man.
Well, in this case, you could put the bat into the man because Batman is actually Kirk
Too
Langham's
wordy,
man
Jared. Too wordy.
Everyone's a critic. But anyway, I enjoyed that movie. So there you go. Dave, go ahead.
It's just interesting, right? Because again, it's like, especially when you start going into the Elseworld kind of thing, right?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like, how far do you want to go? And then where's the line?
Because there are some Elseworld stories that go nuts. Like, whoa.
Right. And so, the thing that I like about obviously working with Bruce is like he tries to set a line, right? I remember even like, because I remember we were talking like, when the pod crashes and they there's that thing of like, the immigrants that go and actually get the baby. Like I remember Bruce was saying like, this could go crazy if you want. Like, it's almost like they pull him out or whatever. And then it's kind of like they look at the baby and his eyes open and he's just shooting everything. Right.
Oh God.
It's like, and I was just like, oh my God, that would be so crazy. And he's like, we're not doing that. So again,
is it weird that I kind of want that now? That would actually be really funny.
So I'm just saying, it's kind of like, there are people that I kind of feel like for the sake of a story, for the sake of kind of like what you want to say about this character, you know what I mean? That, they have to line up a certain way, right? It's kind of like, we want to show that he doesn't have that sort of like, I don't kill thing, but he's still got to be a good guy, a hero, right? So how do you walk that line? At what part of that line does it kind of go over, right? Because there's movies, I feel like, I don't want to really mention names, but that they kind of cross the line, right?
Oh yeah.
And so, again, just having the sort of discipline or sort of like the planning of kind of like, well, what does that say? Do you know what I mean? And again, this director, you know what I mean? It's like you can't cross the line and come back. You know what I mean? So I don't know, like when you're murdering everybody, you can't all of a sudden just kind of say, hey, trust me, I'm a good guy, So
okay, I know who you're talking about now. I know who you're talking about, but yeah, that's true. But I feel like it depends on like the story you're telling, because you could use as a pretty dope like redemption story, saying about like say in BVS when like we have a Batman that's like beaten down. he has just lost his Robin, and there was some precedent for that in the comics where like Jason died and Batman got really dark.
Right.
So it was like the idea that like Batman has no light in his world, so all of a sudden he goes dark. Then when he's inspired by Superman, he's like, oh my gosh, here's a dude that has all these god powers, but he still wants to protect us. What have I been doing?
Right. Yeah. But you got to show that.
Mm-hmm.
You got to clearly show that this is where it is. This is where the point that it, that sparks the idea, and this is the change, and then this is what, I mean? You gotta see all that, right? You can't just kind of skip the middle parts and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, but you're supposed to get it, right? So anyways,
but let me ask you this: have you seen the director's cut of BVS? Because that explains it a lot better. Because for those that don't know,
but Jared, the director's cut of BVS is the only cut.
Well, yeah, because what happened is that for theatrical, they cut a half hour out of the movie, and the half hour is the context half hour where everything is like fleshed out more. So I feel like
groceries. He got groceries.
Yeah, exactly. But so continuing on, so Dave actually has a good question about my favorite animated series, Green Lantern. He said it was so good and should have gotten more seasons. Is it true that the show was canceled because of unsold merch from the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie still taking
pretty
space
much
in stores?
Yeah, I mean that definitely was part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's always like metrics that they're trying to figure out if something is successful or not, but it's TV animation. It would have to be this resounding sort of like thing where people are actually like like it's a bona fide hit. That would change, but we did okay.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I think I've told the story before too, but it's like there's an editor, right, who is I think, as they tell me, right, that there's 4 people that were sort of hired at Warner Brothers, sort of around within the same week, I think, or something like that, right? Bruce Timm, Andrea Romano, Joel Gall, who's the editor, right, and then Kellyanne Downs, who's she works sort of behind the scenes, and especially with the sound and the voice tracks and things like that. But so Joe was like one of the editors, and I remember we were sitting in the editing room, we were sort of editing one of the shows, and he had said it's like, I don't know why this isn't doing as well. It's like, I would put this up against Justice League. I would put this up against Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, 100%.
This is that solid. It's a good show, And so we're just like, yeah, it is kind of what it is. So.
Yeah, you just keep making it. Now I gotta ask: was the standards in practice thing the reason for the changes to the Red Lantern oath? Because when I heard the Red Lantern oath, and it was messing the lines like ripped from a corpse so freshly dead, I'm like, yeah, I kind of get why you changed this for a show aimed at kids. So I'm like, yeah, you don't want. Hey, mommy, guess what I heard in an animated show about superheroes? Ripping blood from corpses.
Right. Yeah, I would guess. I would guess so.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, what I really loved about Green Lantern, even if the change to the oath, is how like it told because the run that I felt was like inspiring this, which was more of the Jeff Johns Green Lantern work, where like you introduce all the different Lantern Corps. You did that in a way where it didn't feel overwhelming, because that's the danger with like introducing so many elements at once. Is the audience going to become like too overwhelmed? But I feel like you did that in a way where it was like one at a time. Okay, this is what the Blue Lantern Corps does. This is what the Green Lantern does. This is why they hate each other. Here we go.
Green Lantern was overwhelming. Young Justice was underwhelming. Why isn't everything just whelmed?
Ah, jeez,
you walked right into that, Jared. You walked right into
it. Speaking of Young Justice.
No, wait. First, I want to hear his thoughts on Green Lantern. Come on, don't upstage me, sirs.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think when I don't know, like I got the job or worked on Green Lantern, right? I wasn't sure how it was going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a story guy, and I really wanted to sort of make sure that because it's kind of comical, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it has a little more humor than I'm used to sort of like working with, right? And I'm not really good at like comedy, like for comedy's sake, right? So yeah, I just kind of felt like, I don't know, like I'll watch, Green Lantern, and there are episodes of something else that I watch. I'm like, oh, that's kind of similar to like this episode in Green Lantern, but it is not as sort of like thick. You know what I mean? Because again, like sometimes I feel like there's a lot of information that's in there too, right?
Yeah.
Like introducing a planet, establishing relationships, establishing sort of like what that world is about, and then what is the dynamic that kind of happens, and what is gained between the team, of Lanterns. But also sort of their relationship with the world, right? Also introducing new characters for the future. I just kind of felt like there was a lot of sort of like really well put together pieces in it, right? Where again, like I've seen shows too where I was just like, we've done, let's just say 5, right? There's 5 things in it that we've accomplished, right? And then there's shows where I'm like, this story maybe only has 2 elements that you're actually introducing, and so just that level of sort of like, I don't know, just, I think involvement and engagement was really, really good. I felt, kudos to the writers.
Yeah, it was really good. Okay, so Nick, now you can ask about Young Justice.
So, could you tell us about your experience working on Young Justice? So, according to your IMDb, you did work on at least 1 episode. So, how was that like for you, sir?
It's so funny, right? I mean, because we were just talking about like, the whole coaching of sort of, you know what I mean?
Okay, here we go.
Because, when things are brought up, right, there's a lot of like experiences that I've had, you know what I mean? That are, nobody cares about it, right? But it's sort of tied into sort of like, where was I at where was I, emotionally, what was my relationships with people at the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, there's the story that I kind of, I don't know, think about with it is more of my personal story and my relationships with, again, like Brandon Vietti, right? Who's the showrunner on it, right? I've known Brandon for a long, long time, right? In animation. I met him in animation, stuff like that. And he was the showrunner on it, right? And so, anyways, the first, I think the episode that you're talking about is the second episode of season 1, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, because I was sort of like a fill-in director for it, because the director that was supposed to again be the rotation director is I think it was Mike Chang and Jay Oliva, right? I can't remember if I took over Mike's episode because he was on a different project and he couldn't go over on time. So basically, I was just slotted in to sort of help them out, just the dynamic of how I think Greg Weisman and Brandon work. They're more of like robot supercomputers, right? Everything is planned out. They have like a board that has like string on it. It's like some sort
of the red string and all that stuff. Yeah.
Like how this connects and what do we need to do here and blah, 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 that kind of stuff. Right. Which is great in a way, but it gets super complicated and it's hard to be creative in that space because you don't have time to be as kind of creative with stuff because you just have to get to this information, right? And so, I don't know, it was interesting. Do you know what I mean? But there wasn't a lot of room. Again, this is just my experience with it, right? There wasn't a lot of room to sort of like infuse a lot of kind of like what, I felt like the story should have been about or something like that, right? Which, I think like Bruce and James Tucker, they work in a totally different way than that, right? Like I've heard stories of like, when they're working on the Justice League and, Batman, it's a little bit more sort of like they have a looser sort of kind of thing with points that they want to hit, and they just sort of see how things organically sort of evolve out of it. And sometimes again that'll spring new ideas for them to sort of, but where I think with the Young Justice people, everything is sort of like laid out, to the millimeter.
Well, yeah, because if you're doing a show, and particular show that like it's not as episodic as it tells one narrative per season, you kind of have to make sure you're setting up all the elements of that big season-long narrative in each of your episodes, because otherwise the audience is gonna look at this like, where the hell did this come from?
Yeah, I mean, not to say that Bruce and them, because obviously you look at things like, Batman Beyond, even, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It all connects or moves forward, right? But it's not as tight as, say, like a Young Justice, right?
Yeah.
But because they're, but I don't know. Again, you can argue different things though, right? Because I kind of feel like, you're able to explore the character a little more sometimes, you know what I mean? But I feel like, especially in the beginning, I think they were figuring it out, you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like in the later parts of the other seasons, they sort of were able to kind of go like, okay, we need to incorporate this more. We'll focus on the characters a little more, or we'll focus on the, so I don't know. It's I think just as a creative, right? Like you, and I say this to storyboard artists too, right? Like the way I run teams is kind of like I kind of like to give them a sandbox, and I like to have them like, them make it, right? Because I kind of feel like as a creative, part of it is your investment in it and what your authorship, right? And how much you feel like I've contributed to this thing, and that is me, that I me kind of thing, right? I kind of feel like as creatives, you need to allow them to kind of feel a certain amount of pride of like, I created that, and so
that makes sense.
Yeah,
I just want
because like I'm like, I feel like the perception is corporate thinks artists are a bunch of drones, or should be. That's the fandom perception of how these things go. I'm trying not to put words in your mouth,
yeah. I mean, because there's a way to do it, right? Because again, like, I mean, we had talked about Creature Commando, right? A little bit, we had that thing with Commando, right? I feel like James Gunn's scripts were really tight, but you still had room to play a little bit. Do you know what I mean? So it had a really, and I kind of feel like it was the way it was written too. You kind of like, you can like, oh, I understand what the scene is about. He was, again, like just writing wise, they're probably like some of the best scripts that I've worked on, right? Whether you like the style or you don't, or you like his sense of humor or whatever that is and stuff like that, that's a taste.
Yeah.
But as far as somebody is like building stuff, because again, I've worked on scripts basically where I'm just like, I probably shouldn't mention stuff because I don't want to,
Yeah. Remember, we're live, so
yeah, it's all good.
You should just get to the point instead of dancing around it, because you spend so much screen time dancing around something and to get to a point, and it causes other. Because you have to pantomime it,
reach into the choir.
But I don't know that goes into another thing too, right? Because again, like on the other hand too, I don't like scripts that basically, and Bruce hates this too, right? Is kind of like you're saying what you're seeing, right? And that's like, you don't need to say it, right? You don't need to like, like a monster's coming. You don't need to go run. You just run. Do you know what I mean? Like, why do you have to say like, oh my God, it's so scary? You're like, you could see that, right? Or like, oh, I found the thing or whatever. You can visually see, you know what I mean? So again, it's kind of like there's certain things, I think especially like concepts, you know what I mean, that are sometimes difficult. Again, just even like that doesn't have any sort of like psychological bearance on the characters. You know what I mean? Like say a Batman, right? He's never going to say like, oh, I'm sorry, right? But he may show you he's sorry, but he's never going to say it. Right?
Depends on the character. Yeah, exactly.
So, like that, totally, right? Because that's a character thing, right? But if it's something that's just like, oh, he finds the key that goes to the thing or whatever, do you know what I mean? Isn't it just easier to be like, instead of like, oh, all these shots of him searching around and whatever, can you just have one shot of searching like, oh, I found the key, or whatever, That's a bad example, but I just kind of feel like James's thing is kind of like you understand conceptually what each scene about something,
Go ahead, Jahee.
And I just want to briefly add to Sam's point and let it be known, on the off chance someone at DC or Warner Brothers discovers that watching this is just my personal opinion, please don't go after this man. All right?
Yes, he's right here. He's right here.
Now, with that being said, the way say what you will about Young Justice, all that, the way it fell off, the revival, say what you will about that. In my opinion, Justice League Unlimited the actual stuff was the best way of handling world building and character dynamics, where it was more anthology. One episode you have these characters, so another episode you may have the Trinity or a two-parter. That way you still have the world building, but you could still have a sandbox and play around a little bit with different character dynamics. At least from what I saw in from the later seasons of Young Justice, it was just too much too fast, and it just became jarring. And even by the time Phantoms rolled around, we got the main roster again. It didn't feel complete. For lack of
kind of turned into a Justice League light show.
What's kind of funny, Sam, is that Nick and I completed essentially a rewatch review of every episode of Justice League, and I'll never forget. So we're talking about it, and it's like when we get to Justice League Unlimited, it got real pain in the ass when I start doing like titling of videos, because a lot of the characters that are featured aren't really searched that much because it's like fire and ice and stuff. Yeah. So I'm like,
you mean people don't care about Our Man?
So I'm like, how the hell do I title this to get views?
That's so funny, because it's like, it's a little bit, because you're talking about marketing basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, and fans again will always say like, well, how come there's always Batman? I'm too
because people like Batman. That's why.
Or Batman sells. That's the important thing.
So there's going to be that contingent of people that want those really obscure stuff, but from a marketing point of view, it's hard to sell it, right? So,
yeah, and the thing is like, I encounter this in the comic book space because there's so many people that are like, oh, why don't we have this book or this book or this book? And I'm like, because DC has done this where they release a book that as like an obscure character that you all wanted, you didn't buy the book. So do you really expect them to get? Part of the reason why Batman is like, has like 18 books is because people buy all of his stuff.
Right. And myself stuff like. Mm-hmm. Batman Soul of the Dragon, where it's not even really a Batman story.
My God. That was like the first thing I brought up with you.
Yeah.
And people complain like, oh, there's not a Batman in it. You're like, look, we're just trying to tell, you know what I mean?
You have to do that because...
Richard Dragon, Bronze Tiger, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's kind of what Bruce wanted to do, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like, we got to get Batman in there as the hook and stuff like that. So then people complain there's not enough Batman. You're like, but then there's other people complaining, like, how come we don't get like a Shiva movie, a story?
Because no one searches for Shiva.
You know what I mean? Like,
I understand why. I understand why you put Batman in there, but if you would have cut Batman out, it probably would have made for a better movie. But I totally get why you did it.
Okay, I disagree with you because again, I think Batman, the way he's put in there, like he is one of the four, right? He is integral piece in itself. So I don't.
Let him cook, Nick. Let him cook.
Come on.
All right. He wrote the story, so okay.
Mm-hmm. I didn't write it. This is a total Bruce Timm. This is his love letter. Bruce loves. I think he's most comfortable in the 70s, right? Like he has a very fond thing about the 70s, And so, I don't know. I love it, And so, but I
like the movie, by the way. I'm not trying to scratch it. I like it.
And it's his, right? And I'm not deferring credit because I think it's, because I'm ashamed of it or something like that. I love it. I wish that I could take credit for it, but the credit does go to Bruce.
I'm not saying the movie is bad or anything. Personally, I like Soul of the Dragon.
So again, it's because it like, are there movies of obscure characters that you want?
Oh yeah, like Deathstroke, like
Deathstroke obscure.
I mean, compared to Batman, yeah, he is. And by the way, we got a Deathstroke movie. It was awesome. No. I know I brought this up to you last time you were on here, but I guess at this point, Wonder Woman would kind of count as obscure in terms of sales, maybe.
All right, if we're gonna talk obscure,
I gotta talk. Wait, go ahead, Nick.
No, you're going first. You first, sir.
Yeah, I gotta talk. All right, so tell me about working on Wonder Woman Bloodlines. We kind of touched on it last time. I kind of wanted to talk about this a little more because I mean, I enjoyed it for what it was, a Wonder Woman origin in this universe. Again, my issues with the later movies, how it was like
trying
to like
origin he's worked on, but
how it was trying to like force a lot of this direction. You know that, but I'm approaching this as like as a Wonder Woman as a separate project and not part of the universe.
Right. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I kind of said too when I read the script, I was just like, oh, I thought it was going to be like a bigger story, you know. But when I talked to James about it, right, he was just like, this, like, in his mind again, the objective of the story was to basically introduce the Wonder Woman family, I suppose, the people that are associated with Wonder Woman, right? Because again, like with Batman, everybody knows already, right? He's got his rogues gallery, he's got Alfred, his death of his parents, who are his allies, right? Like everybody understands the family, right? Superman, again, you understand that there's Lois, Jimmy, Perry, like you get that, right? But Wonder Woman, Steve Trevor, that's kind of it, right?
And Steve Trevor only because of the movie.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, so again, his, I guess, objective to this was to kind of go like, okay, these are the people in Wonder Woman's sphere. Which
it does a good job of that. Credit where credit is due. It does a great job of that, introducing like even Ferdinand.
Ferdinand. I was like, I didn't even know who Ferdinand.
I didn't even know who that was. What's kind of funny is that I was reading a random Wonder Woman comic, and all of a sudden I see a Minotaur bring her lunch. I'm like, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
That's some bull crap right there.
Yeah, exactly. But see, the thing is, see, here's the thing for a character, and this is mainly more of an issue with how DC handles Wonder Woman, is just because they market her as like the third member of the Trinity, but they don't do a lot of stuff to push her as a member of the Trinity. I understand in terms of like sales, in terms of a movie or something like that, but I feel like they could be doing more for her.
Yeah, again, it goes back to marketing, right? It's like when you do a Wonder Woman movie, right? As a creative, you're trying to accomplish or service different things, right? Because again, with James, it's kind of like, I want to set up the world so I can tell Wonder Woman stories, right? But then we basically all got fired. You know what I mean? Not because of Wonder Woman. I just want to make sure that that's understood, right? Whether you like it or you don't, but his goal was to sort of set up, you know what I mean, the Wonder Woman sort of sphere, and then we can start telling stories about Wonder Woman. But again, we never got that chance, right? But from the marketing side of it, again, it's kind of like they just see like, oh, that Wonder Woman movie didn't do very well, right? It's not like I don't know. Again, I kind of feel like it's not like, if you think it's a bad movie, I kind of feel like it's like what you said, right? It's because there's too much stuff in it, right? It's not pared down. It's not focused on one thing, right? Even though they tried to, right? And so we tried to make Silver Swan a lot more, like her story to be a lot more sort of emotional kind of thing. But again, it's difficult because again, it needs more time, right? Because there's all these other pieces in it, right? The stories that are best is kind of like all the pieces make sense and you don't have a lot of extra pieces because all that does is sort of like clutter it, right? Which I think fans don't not all fans, right? But a majority of the vocal fans don't understand that, right? They want more, right? But I'm like, your stories get muddled when you get more. Like, no, they don't. And I'm just like,
all they want is like fan service, and to a certain degree, fan service is great because it shows, hey, we're really pulling from the comics. But when it becomes like, let me put it this way: if it had been like you put in literally every single Wonder Woman character that's ever existed, it would get like, to your point, it would get bogged down the story, and that's what my problem is, at least a little bit with the fandom, is that they tend to want like all this stuff. But A, they don't understand from a story perspective how that actually plays out. And two, they want stuff that may not translate well onto like the page or onto like the screen. In the case of like how I brought up sometimes where I don't really care that much if you're adapting a story and you change some stuff, because I get that like sometimes you have to change per medium when you're adapting stuff. As long as you keep like the overall like gist of the story, like where the Doom that came to Gotham, it's like, okay, you're fine. You can change some stuff and it's still the Doom that came to Gotham.
Yeah, I think because of the medium.
Yeah.
And again, I think conceptually, some people will get it and some people won't, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you're reading a comic book, right? It's kind of like you go at the pace you want it to go.
Yeah.
When you're like, oh, the sequence is really good. The scene's really good. Let me just read. Okay, I'm in this flow, which is almost close to like when you're in a movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can just like, it stops. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to go eat a sandwich or get some coffee or something like that. Then I'll come back and let me start again. And here's the thing, right? A movie is not like that. It's a ride. It's a contained ride.
Mm-hmm.
You're stuck in the roller coaster and you're not done until the roller coaster's finished, basically, right? And so that experience you have to sort of control. And it's moment to moment to moment kind of a thing, right? So there are other factors to it, right? Because they kind of feel like, I don't know. I always bring up sort of like there's this, I don't know. It's kind of obscure also, right? But there's a Terminator 2. I remember there was a DVD, right, of Terminator 2, right? There's the theatrical cut, there's the sort of director's cut, and then there's the cut that basically James Cameron kind of did before he actually cut the story all the way down. Right? They feel like three different total. The first two feel closer, and the third one feels like a totally different movie. The pace is slow, right? Is because again it goes to a thing and then it goes into these other shots of just extra stuff happening. It all makes sense, right? But it slows the pace down, right? And so those are things that that books have its own kind of thing that's forgivable, right? But you can't do it in a movie. Right?
No,
Because
you can't.
You're emotionally riding this thing, and then you need to transition from this thing to this next thing that you want to talk about. And then again, if you're kind of in the story, and then all of a sudden, that's why like with series, it's better, right? Because again, you have like, oh, here's 45 minutes of this, whatever, and then wait till next week or whatever like that. Or you're like, even if it's not like, okay, you're streaming it, then it becomes like, okay, there's a break. Let me start the next episode, right? And you can tell a story about a side character, and you're just following that side character and their story until it's done, and then it's done. You have to wait for the credits, whatever, and then you start the next one. Then you're like, okay, now we're back into the main thread, right? You can't do that in a movie, right? Because it's about this character, and then it's about this character, and then it's about this character,
plus also here's the thing: it costs money to draw all these different characters and do all this different stuff. So when you want 8,000 characters, let's say you could, from a story perspective, make that work. These movies, like you said, don't get that much in terms of a budget. So there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Like the budget is basically $5 and half a ham sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, because it's with these shorts, it's a similar thing, right? Because money wise, on paper, when they're breaking it down, right, is like, oh, what's the length of a directed video, right? Let's just say like, okay, let's say it's an hour long, right? It's like, okay, if it's an hour, we can make 4 short stories that are 15 minutes each. That adds up to an hour. So that should be fine. Right? But the thing is, each 15 minutes has different voice actors. Each 15 minutes, you could be like the Under the Sea episode, you can have one that's out in space or whatever, and then one in the circus. Right?
One that's in the extreme future.
So what Sam's saying is, we have girl math, we have boy math, we have dog math, and we have producer math.
Yeah.
Well, it's like if you don't tell anyone that this is a compilation of other of like a bunch of separate things, people are gonna be like, okay, so I'm watching this. Why did everything change all of a sudden?
I'm just saying it, right? It's like when you have a budget and you're filming one story, right? There are things that you can reuse, right? Actors, first of all, right? You have the same actors of whatever your cast is of characters, right? They're there for the whole thing, right? But if you're telling 4 stories, that's 4 different sets of casts, 4 different main actors. They just have shorter screen time. It's like you have to pick 4 different contracts for, you know what I mean? Depending on what it is, and then your backgrounds also is like you can't reuse that stuff, and so. And especially if it's like, okay, now it's a whole different style of something, right? Yeah. Then you're like, that's like a different animation studio then.
And like and not like that, but I imagine like for a movie, you create let's say you have a cast of 4 characters for your movie, and now you have a cast of 16 characters. So you have to pay people to create the character designs for, instead of 4 characters, you have 16 characters. I'm sorry if my math is wrong, but But does that track, Sam?
Yeah, exactly. Especially, and then styles. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, that's even better.
I mean, you're the expert here, so I'm
No. Like, it's just, again, like, on a very one level kind of thing. You just think like, 4 15-minute things equals an hour, so that works.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of the way that works. So moving on to another question from the audience. So Robert says, Sam, you directed episodes for Batman and Beware the Batman. How was it working on both shows, and what were the differences in the creative processes handling either Batman?
Let's see. The Batman was interesting, right? Because again, it's I think they wanted like a younger Batman, they wanted a little more hipper, and things like that. Things that I feel like I think most of the crew kind of felt like we were kind of coming in, we were going to follow Batman the Animated Series, right? So we were all pumped up, right? I think even the producer was just kind of like showing us like noir movies and things like that. But then we got the scripts and we just actually got into it. We realized they don't want noir. You know what I mean?
It was not a noir show.
Yeah, it's less Citizen Kane, more sort of Dick Tracy. They wanted like this goofy, whatever version of it and stuff like that. So
we're talking about the 2000s one where Batman was solo in the beginning, not like Batman Brave and the Bold.
Brave and the Bold was different also, right? So,
yeah, Brave and the Bold was definitely more of like, hey, let's do kind of like an Adam West kind of silly thing. See, the Batman, in my opinion, it felt like it was more serious than BTAS. Like the art design had more of like a 2000s edge to it. I mean, the Joker design for actually, I kind of want to touch upon that. Like, so who was the one who designed that the Joker design? Because that is like a very big departure from what we know of as Joker.
Yeah, let me finish answering this.
I'm sorry.
Beware the Batman was CGI, right?
And
so that had its own difficulties. I think both productions were probably some of the harder productions that I've worked on. Green Lantern was actually one of the easier productions that I worked on.
Really?
Yeah. Being CGI.
I think I'm thinking of two different shows. Sorry.
Okay.
And so I don't know. Again, they're both. It's funny that again both of them were, I think, difficult productions for me. If I'm being candid about it. And so, like Beware got so bad where the directors didn't even get to sit in basically the edit. As the footage was being finalized, because we were so behind on that. So I guess I don't know. Like actually, for both of them, I kind of washed my hands after the storyboarding things. After we, like post, I kind of just sort of checked out.
I see. I got it.
Yeah.
Oh, and I do want to apologize. I was thinking of The Batman, which you actually did work on.
Yeah. That's my first Warner Brothers project.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's according to the IMDb, you were the director for 7 episodes. That was the one with like the wild Joker design that I was talking about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got confused. So
No, well, in your defense, Nick, there's so many Batman shows. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Referring to because Jeff Matsuda was the designer on that.
Okay. Yeah, because like that's the one that had like we weren't used to, we'd never seen that kind of like wild Joker design before.
Yeah. It's interesting because again, I think like Bruce, I think his design philosophy is a lot more sort of about.
I think he means the
yes,
little guy,
yes.
So I had a friend who who had a son, And so she said that he saw him when he was young and he was scared of it, right? They refer to it as like
see that
monster Batman, right? And so, but Jeff's design style is not like, if you look at the toy line, like Bruce has a basic male body, female body, right? And they're just either bigger or smaller, or whatever the proportions are, whatever. Like, I remember when Jeff was like, I don't want any silhouette to look the same. Like every silhouette is different, you know? And so, yeah, he highly creative, right? So
I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. At least it was different, at least. And
for those, before we go any further, for those who aren't aware, Sam, could you explain what a silhouette is?
It's like,
I know what it is, but I wanted you to explain it.
Okay. It's kind of like, just, you know, it's almost like if you, it's like the outline of them, right? If you like have a character and you just made it all black, right? Like, what does that shape look like?
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
Explain it.
Yeah, that works. Continuing on.
Oh, it's awkward. It's awkward now. It's awkward.
Nice one, Jay. So Robert asks, also, it's been implied that Batman and Harley Quinn, we got to talk about that one, and Justice League versus the Fatal Five are set in the Timverse. Was that ever intended?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, there's a show, everybody.
Wait, so you're telling me that Justice League versus Fatal Five was like intended to be like a separate thing?
Standalone?
Originally it was.
Originally, okay.
Yeah, it sort of became into it just because, you know, I think like Bruce, you know, I think originally when it was written and created, I don't think, I'm speaking for Bruce, and just, this is me, you know, with my best guess. I don't think he intended it to be. In fact, I know it wasn't, right? Because there was supposed to be a different character designer that was going to do it, right? Which doesn't look like Bruce Timm at all, right? But, and that's the sad thing, or the funny but kind of sad thing, right? Is like, I remember Red Sun too. It was, it's kind of like, when people aren't available, I just remember Red Sun and I don't think it was with the Fatal Five, but you know, we had a hard time finding like a lead character designer, and so like Red Sun just sort of defaulted into Bruce's, and it always defaults to his style because, again, like there's so much of it. You know, we have background characters, whatever. We have a library of things that we can sort of like,
a lot to draw from, basically.
And it's
we don't need
simple as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so, so Fatal Five was something that sort of like, you know, we got the voice actors from, you know, Justice League, and so it became a thing where it's just like, you know, this doesn't break anything. And I think that just because, like, you know, there's so many people that were sort of talking about it, it's like we could make this into a, you know, Justice League sort of connected kind of thing. So with just minor tweaking and whatever like that, it sort of became that.
I mean, yeah, it was. It took place the most like future in the timeline. So yeah, you could just say, as you put in a couple of throwaway lines that say these characters are doing this, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So all right, so I have this thing with Nick where we make fun, where we talk about Batman and Harley Quinn, and here's what I want to talk about here. So, whose decision was it to have?
Harley Quinn talk about that scene.
Whose decision was it to have Harley Quinn seduce Nightwing? I gotta ask this because this is like a common joke on the show.
You've been waiting for this one.
Yes, I have. I have, as a matter of fact.
I have to say, Sam, when you were doing the scene, did anyone bring up the comment? You know, this is kind of questionable. It's almost like Harley Quinn is. I'm trying to like censor my words here. Like he's, you know, like Little Richard's not consenting. Let's just put it that way.
Well, you know, I think like tonally again, I think Bruce kind of intended this to be a different thing.
Okay.
It wasn't supposed to be, and I think that's one of the hard things about our job, you know, Killing Joke almost being the other example of it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of like, this is like I think what they were thinking was kind of like, this Harley was more like one of those sort of older, sort of like silly romp kind of stories, right?
Okay.
And Killing Joke was supposed to be this dark noir, you know what I mean, like psychologically screwed up story.
Oh yeah.
But unfortunately, they all have the same art style, so everybody kind of defaults it back down to, I think, Batman the Animated Series and whatever the tone that was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And noirish, but sort of, kind of clean, thing. So that's just kind of it. Do you know what I mean? It's difficult, especially when you have all these restrictions and you're using the same art style. Because I don't obviously blame fans or whatever, because again, it's the art style. It's the same art style, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we're like, why is this happening in the DCAU? Oh yeah, this isn't technically in the DCAU, because at least with Batman Harley Quinn, there was more arguments of, yeah, this is a separate thing based upon the fact that these characters are doing stuff that they weren't doing in the show and such.
Yeah. Plus the art style, like Fatal 5 is the DCAU art style, like pretty much verboten. Whereas Harley Quinn, it's close to the Bruce Timm style, but not
It's
quite.
tweaked
Kind of
slightly.
It's enough to feel like its own thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like Fatal 5 it was more in line to sort of be attached to the Justice League universe, right? I think Bruce wanted Harley to be its own sort of thing that's a lot more sort of silly and kind of it leans into comedy, some of it inappropriate, some of it, whatever, but it's from I think a different era, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, Killing Joke again was trying to be like because I think, like, again, like if it was not Batman, right? And it was live action, do you know what I mean? I think that story would hold up better, right? But because it's
still work
in an animated Bruce Timm style, you know what I mean, and it's animation, and not like amazing.
Yeah, honestly, when it comes to the Killing Joke movie,
it's
I think people's problem is literally just that one scene. Like, if you were to remove that one scene from the movie,
of Batman and Barbara. Now, yeah, because when you explain the whole purpose of the first like half hour of the movie, I'm like, okay, fine. There's a story reason for that. It's a good story reason. The scene when Barbara sleeps with Batman, I have issues with, not because Barbara has a crush on Batman, because that happens. It's the fact that he reciprocates.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, okay, wait a second here.
I mean, my defense is, if I were to play devil's advocate, is that both
as you
adults
normally do.
Well, someone has to. But they're both consenting adults. He the passion moment.
Again, like, I think that's the thing that I was trying to explain to Jared, was that again, they're mistakes, right? It wasn't.
Yeah.
It is supposed to be I wish we had a little more. I'm sure Bruce would disagree with me, because but it's supposed to be psychologically messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's about
that's
mistakes. It's about the one bad day. It's about the abyss.
Yeah.
It's about obsession. Mm-hmm. It's about you're not in your right mindset. You're fixating on because again the whole thing about Barbara, right, and Batman a little bit is kind of like her journey of basically starting off, basically try to start the movie, basically she's at her height, right? She's adrenaline, she's with Batman, they're disrupting robbers, whatever, they're taking them out, kind of a thing, and then like job well done or whatever, and this is my life and it's great, right? Then it becomes like you meet that Paris France guy who basically obsesses about her, and he basically is making her really uncomfortable, and then she's doing stuff because she's uncomfortable, and it's affecting how she works. And Batman is kind of like you're getting like you're not yourself right now. You know, you're making these bad decisions. You know, you need to step away from the abyss, basically, and which makes her even more kind of like want to sort of like prove herself to him. And then it gets messy, right? And then becomes a thing where she, you know, again, is so angry, and she's, you know what I mean? And she's trying to sort of like make things back the way they used to be, you know, with Batman when things were good, and you know she was going to murder Paris Franz, whatever, and then she basically stops and realizes, you're right, I'm in this abyss now, you know, and I need to hang up and let go of my costume because I'm too close to this right now, you know. Which I kind of feel like is, maybe I just made this up. I was trying to make sense of the script. Like maybe that is the thing that prompts Batman to go like, I need to talk to the Joker because I'm in the same abyss with Joker. And so we need to talk about, like, we need to stop before somebody kills each other, right? So again, like to me, you know, very sort of two separate idea, but it's kind of joined together kind of a thing. I was like, at least when I was building it, I was just like, okay, that makes sense to me, right?
That makes sense.
This is the thing that sort of starts his path onto, because why would Batman have a conversation with Joker? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
It's like, why is he like, okay, we need to stop doing this because somebody's gonna kill each other, you know?
Yeah, because like the Joker and the Batman are famous for like the dance they have. You know, it's like that one line from the Dark Knight where it's like, I don't want to kill you. You're too much fun.
Yeah.
Do I really look like I'm the guy with the plan? So,
Don't start with the head. The victim gets all fuzzy.
Yeah. So Dave asked, moving on to a very different topic, how was your experience working on Extreme Ghostbusters? Great show and still the best legacy sequel to Ghostbusters.
You know,
You're gonna call Sam Liu.
Ghostbusters has a special place in my heart just because it. I think that was the show that I became a storyboard artist on in the beginning, and then I became a director by the end of it. And so I think you know, there were some stories of it that I thought, you know what I mean, outside of it being just this, you know, monster of the week kind of, you know, silly thing, but I kind of felt like there were some good characters in it, you know, and there was actually some sort of like exploration of characters in it. And so, I mean, you know, again, I think it holds a special place in my heart again, because I was learning a lot about the craft. And I guess just, you know, proving to my bosses that
there you go.
you do the job, you know. So
it's basically like the animation where you kind of came into your own, I guess.
Yeah. And you know, I think that again, like the group that I kind of came up with, you know, I mean, we weren't sort of necessarily from animation. A lot of us were sort of like comic book kind of people. So I kind of feel like, in a way, or people that were trying to be comic book people, most of us, you know, either left it or couldn't make it. And you know, I kind of feel like I mean, even with the Batman, right? When we kind of came in, I kind of feel like we changed. You know, we kind of moved it into, you know, the anime sphere a little bit more.
A little bit, yeah.
I remember even
because like the Batman that started, by the time it ended, it was almost like an entirely different show.
Yeah, I mean, because I remember even just things with timing, right? Like we were talking, because there used to be checkers, right? Which is a timing, but like boring kind of technical stuff, right? Like timing sheets and all that kind of stuff, right? We were kind of doing things like much faster than they were normally doing in like regular, I guess, American kind of, you know, animation. And I remember the checkers were just like, this is way too fast, right? We're just like, no, it's got to be fast, you know, like these fights need to be much faster, you know what I mean? Like, you know, the way they're slamming into walls, the way they're punching and things like that, you know? So I think that, again, in the beginning, like we were kind of, you know, freaking out some of the sort of more established sort of people that have been there for a long time.
It's not the way things are done.
Yeah, but even like boarding, because again, I remember, you know, that we were kind of like these just, you know, people that loved like anime, you know, Hong Kong cinema, you know, Joaquin Dos Santos sort of came out of there as well, you know. Do you guys know who Joaquin is? He's one of the directors on Spider-Verse.
Okay.
He was like, you know, on like Korra and like Avatar.
Nice.
He was a director on Avatar. I think he became a producer on Korra.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew, but me and Jared, we actually did a whole rewatch on the entire Avatar series.
Okay,
that was fun. That was fun.
Yeah.
He wasn't a fan of season 3. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah,
it's just the pacing was off on me, but anyway.
He was loving it though. Like he loved season. He liked season 1. He loved season 2. I mean, that's where he introduced Toph. So of course, it's the best character ever. But no, sorry.
But so Robert has another question. He said the writer of Batman Superman Public Enemy said he always wanted to do the third storyline. Superman and Batman are raised to be despots by villains. Was that ever planned or just wishful thinking on him? In other words, was there ever going to be like a sequel to Superman Batman Public Enemies?
Is this? Wow, I can't believe I forgot the writer of the. Are we talking about the comic or are we talking about the animated series or the animated?
Animated.
I think the animated movie, because I think this did end up becoming a comic, if I remember correctly.
It was a comic and then a movie, I think.
No, not Public Enemies. The one where Batman and Superman are raised by despots. The Legion of Superheroes got involved.
No, we're talking about. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. So.
Interesting. But hey, what's up, K-pop? And are you all going to Florida?
I am unable. I am unable. See, I'm at the top of the states, and that's at the bottom. So unless I want to take a plane, I'm not going to.
The animated movie, and it'll be a sequel to Supergirl. Oh, you mean it'll be a sequel to technically Apocalypse? I see there.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's something else I want to touch upon. So going through your IMDb, I didn't realize you worked on Godzilla the animated series. So my question for you is, what was that like? And were you like restricted from using the Toho monsters? So like I watched like videos where like you guys kind of created substitute monsters. Like, was that the case?
That was again, like, you know, I think more about like where I was at that time, you know, in my life. But so I remember I was going to leave Sony, right? Because again, I wanted to work with Bruce Timm.
Yeah.
And I almost worked on Batman Beyond. But
geez, yeah, there you go.
At the time, right?
I literally have all 3 seasons on my shelf.
And we say that because again, it's, you know, afterthought, because we all know what Batman Beyond became, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, it was like, oh, this isn't Batman. This is a young Batman in the future, you know. And this is before anything was shown or any, you know, episodes had come.
Yeah, like now we view Batman Beyond as like a legendary series, but back then it was like, eh. Yeah,
but also Godzilla, right, was supposed to be this big blockbuster thing that was supposed to come out, right? It was supposed to be a 3-movie deal with Roland Emmerich and the Independence Day guys, right?
Yeah.
And so it was supposed to be this big deal thing, right? But I really wanted to work with Bruce Timm, right? But they didn't have a directing or a storyboarding slot, right? And I was a very young director at the time. And so they asked me if I wanted to be a character designer. And so I didn't really want to, because again, like I was from comics and I was too slow to do comics. And so one of the last things I wanted to do was, you know, have to draw super tight again, you know? And so, I don't know. So that was my memory, you know what I mean? Like the big sort of memory of it, right? But I just remember also just, you know, it was supposed to be this big movie, right? And history again became what it did, right? The first movie came out and it didn't, I guess, people didn't like it very much or didn't accept it. So
I enjoyed it. I'll give you that. I enjoyed it.
So it only made one movie instead of the 3.
That's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Sorry, someone had to say it. Someone had to.
So it was, I don't know. Again, it was, you know, there were some sort of like, you know, cool episodes, but a lot of it was sort of monster of the week kind of thing, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, you know, it was fun to work on.
Our last question of the night, Robert asks, Justice League Crisis on Two Earths was originally supposed to be a Justice League movie to bridge the first series on Unlimited. How was the restructuring process for turning that into a standalone movie?
Yeah, shoot, because I didn't work on Justice League. So I mean, I did one episode as a on it, which I don't know. There's another story with that too. But yeah, you know, that was between Dwayne McDuffie, I think. And I think it was a thing where, you know, like, again, like part of the whole process of it, right, is kind of you know, the direct-to-video stuff, right, is like home video basically wanted to do a thing where, you know, they did the sort of I guess important graphic novels, right? And so, but there are times kind of like where they, you know, it's almost like there's a time where they're like, okay, well, you know, well, what do we do next? You know, do you have an idea? You know, does anybody? That's what the powwows are for, basically. Of kind of like, does home video have something that they want to push? You know, does DC have something they want to push? You know, and then with us, it's usually that. But then if, you know, which ones do we see that we can make into, you know, that's producible, basically, right? But then there's the rare times. For me, it was like Gotham, the Doom that came to Gotham, right? It's kind of like, well, what do you want to do, right? And so I think, you know, Bruce, you know, talked to Dwayne about like, well, what do we do? And you know, it became like, oh, what about that story that we had that we were going to do? You know,
there you go.
So I don't know. Again, like half of this stuff is pseudo planned, and again, like I think I talked about in the past just about the whole thing about, you know, the struggles of, but also the dedication of James really trying to make a persistent story out of all these graphic novels. You know, that's why, you know, it's weird for some people, but again, it becomes a thing of like navigating the business of it, right? Because it's like they want Death of Superman, but then James is kind of like, I'll take it if I can put it into our universe, right?
You know my opinion on that. So.
No, yeah. But again, that's it's unsexy, but that's kind of just how sometimes the business is, right?
So what you're saying for the audience is a lot of times it's out of your hands. That they say, hey, we want you to make a Death of Superman movie in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have things about it, right? But then again, we have a pipeline that makes things producible. You know, like with James, is like was really committed to, again, like having a certain style, because again, it's kind of like if it's kind of like, again, these things happen so fast and our budgets are so small, you know, like, okay, now we're gonna have to do a George Perez style. Can't use anything. Like we have to like recreate background characters, you know, people on the streets, you know, like.
Well, plus, if you're trying to set these in one continuity, it's easier for the audience to buy that if they're all in one art style and everything looks the same.
Yeah, I mean, because again, it's kind of like, even with Killing Joke, we tried to make it as close to Brian Boland's art style. His style is so like render heavy, you know what I mean? And it's so like, he's such a good draftsman, right? It's like, you can't do that on this budget, and you can't do that with like C-tier animators, right? Or, you know, because again, like a lot of our budget is kind of like, again, we only get so many A-tier, so many B-tier, so many C-tier, right? We don't do that on our end, right? But that's what I hear how the animation studios overseas work, right? They have a budget, and then with their budget, they kind of feel like how many A-tier we can get, which is a very few, you know, and then the B-tier, which still very few, and then the rest of it has to be filled out by C tier stuff, right? And it's a purely pay level kind of thing, right? Because it all comes down to money, right, and time. You know, the almost going back to the beginning, right, of just, you know, the difference between, you know, Marvel and DC kind of thing is like DC has its pipeline worked out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they were committed to basically, you know, again, until sort of the new management came about, right? They were committed to basically putting out these direct videos, right? I mean, I guess, again, in my mind, I thought, oh, you know, I could write this out for another 10 years. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But again, since the company got sold and rebought or whatever like that, again, like, I think they still don't know like what the big plan for the animation department is, you know.
Mm-hmm. But
But
you would think that they would have something like established and set in stone, because, like I said at the beginning of this, DC has a very strong legacy. DC Warner Brothers has a particularly strong like legacy in terms of like animation. So you'd really think that they would be more involved in that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's a good place to leave it. Sam, thanks for coming on. You're always welcome, brother. And we will see you guys later. All right. Stay heroic. Bye-bye.